Today I am sharing about secret millionaires. I love this topic because it blows apart so many of the narratives and the mindset limitations and the assumptions that we have around wealth. If we have a high income, we equate that to wealth. But if we're looking at wealth building, then we see that even working class folks who we know don't make a lot of income, can become wildly successful. And today I'm going to share about 4 different secret millionaires. I've got a librarian, a secretary, a janitor, and a hairdresser who all left big legacies. And I'm gonna also share just a little bit about their investing secrets. I've been studying secret millionaires for a long time. I love the topic. So I want to leave you today with some inspiration, also where you can go to learn more, because I am going to do a special training next Tuesday that I'll tell you about. And you might have seen my post about Sylvia Bloom. She's not even in my list, but she is definitely one of my favorite secret millionaires, a legal secretary in Manhattan who took public transportation every day from her rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn and ended up building a legacy of $9 million. About $8 million was left for scholarships and to different charities. So you can probably see or read in my Facebook or in the email that I just sent out about Sylvia Bloom. But let's talk about the librarian Robert Morin. Now, sometimes when we talk about secret millionaires, one of the assumptions or stereotypes that comes up is that they might be super frugal. And in this case, that is correct. Not in all cases. I personally, I don't want to live like so frugal that people think I'm incredibly poor because my clothes aren't mended. But Robert Morin, he was driving around, I believe, a very old Plymouth, had, kind of threadbare clothes, but he was a librarian at a university. He was well loved. He was absolutely well loved by the students, and he loved his work. And so he wanted to really leave his mark on that university. And he did. He lived very frugally. He had very diversified investments, stocks, also some life insurance, some other things. He worked with an advisor. He left, I think it was $7 million to the university. One of the things that they did with that money is they built a new student center that helped students in their careers, help them get jobs, help direct them in their careers. And so that was part of his legacy. There was also some controversy that a chunk of it was used in the football stadium. I guess he wasn't like a big football fan, so some people argued that, I don't know that he would have loved that. But, he did leave it up to the university to decide what they were going to do with that money. And so that was Robert Morin, the librarian. Grace Groner, I love her story. Like Sylvia, Grace Groner was a secretary. In her 20s, she got a job in Abbott Laboratories. That company ended up quite successful. It was a biotech, a healthcare company. They ended up splitting into 2 different companies at some point. They had stock splits, dividends. Right now, one of the companies that has grown out of that is AbbVie. I'm invested in AbbVie. But Grace Groner bought, according to legend, nobody has disputed this legend. Part of my brain goes, does the math really work? Did she only buy 3 shares of $180 and grow it into like an $8 million? But she did grow her Abbott Laboratories stock into a huge fortune. She never sold any shares. She always reinvested the dividends. And Grace Groner, her life story was very interesting. She was a twin, orphaned as a young child because her parents were killed in an accident, and one of the community leaders, their family, took in Grace and her sister and took them in as if they were her own. They gave her a really good education. They lived in, I believe it was Iowa, and sent them to private school. So Grace felt so grateful that she was blessed with this quality education, that her passion was also around scholarships. She left huge scholarships for her alma mater. Am I saying that right? And Grace lived in a one-bedroom home. She was also fairly frugal, but when I dug into her story, she wasn't like Robert Morin. She did some travel. She spent money on things that were important to her. She also gave away money along the way. After she retired from Abbott Laboratories, she was, I think, a volunteer secretary for some time at the local church. And when somebody would come in, and she would know because of working at the church, when someone had special needs and needs for money, sometimes she would just anonymously give away money and support the person that was in need. So she just sounds like an amazing woman, and she left some very meaningful scholarships that she wanted to do for other girls, other teenagers, what her family had done for her when her birth family passed away. Ronald Reed, I love his story as well. Ronald Reed was a Army veteran. He worked as a gas station attendant for some time when he came back from, I think it was World War II that he came back from. And then his longest career was as a janitor for J.C. Penney's. He worked as a janitor. Nobody really expected Ronald Reed to have a lot of money. He didn't have any children of his own, but he did marry a woman who had a couple of children. He outlived her. And he lived in Vermont. He stayed very active and healthy into his 90s. He was known for, chopping wood, and he did all the chores himself. And he had a couple of things that he loved to do. And one of them was to go have breakfast at the local cafeteria at the local hospital. He was not a patient there, but hospitals, they'll oftentimes have cafeterias that you can go and eat in. And Ronald Reed would go, and he would have peanut butter on his English muffin and have coffee and maybe eggs, and that was one of the things he enjoyed doing. He also really loved to go to the library, to the local library. He just wasn't someone who really spent money. He had these things that he enjoyed doing. And when he passed in his 90s, I believe, he left about $8 million, the janitor who left $8 million, just incredible. And when he was having his coffee in the cafeteria, he would oftentimes be reading the Wall Street Journal. So he did his own investments. He was very knowledgeable. He liked talking about investments with people. So people who knew him kind of knew, it's like, Ronald, he likes to invest. He likes to dabble a little in the stock market. He bought a lot of dividend stocks and blue chip stocks. But nobody expected him to leave millions. People thought, well, he's got a few $1,000s extra on the side through the stock market. But nope, he left millions, and he left it to the library and to the hospital where he enjoyed spending his time. Eugenia Dodson. Eugenia Dodson was a hairdresser, and she married the love of her life. She enjoyed doing hair. She built up a business. The love of her life was a civil engineer, her husband. And he died a little on the young side, and he had some land. The land had been used for mining. It was a quarry for some different minerals, and she took her ownership share. I was not able to find out the dollar amount, but I just read that it was a modest inheritance that he had left her. And for 50 years, she invested it. She grew it. She also, like Ronald Reed, she liked to buy blue chip quality stocks. And like Ronald Reed, she did her own investing. She would ask the questions at, all of the quarterly or annual meetings for the stockholders. She was a very savvy investor. Oh, and she, by the way, along the way, she had some physical challenges, some pretty major physical challenges. She had lung cancer. She ended up at one point having part of her lung removed. She had two brothers whom she was very close to, who they passed of diabetes. So she wanted to leave her money for medical research. And when she passed at age 100, she left more than $35 million to these causes. And again, it was money she had invested for 50 years. So some of the things that these secret millionaires have in common: they stayed invested. They invested in stocks. They stayed invested for a long time. One of the things that Charlie Munger used to say, Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's investing partner and the co-chair of Berkshire Hathaway, Charlie Munger passed just several weeks short of his 100th birthday. And one of the last speeches he gave, he said, "Here's our secret. We stayed invested and we didn't die." I love that. Charlie always had a great sense of humor, but it was true. You know, a lot of people, they give up on investing. You know, oh, you're 60 now, you ought to stop investing and do something super safe. And there is a huge, absolutely a huge opportunity to have money that is in the safe, reliable, or the fixed income category. I did a special training recently with Scott McRae around a certain kind of annuity that's really doing wonders for people on the fixed income side. But we also want to balance that with growth, depending on, you know, your risk tolerance, depending on also how long you expect to live. If your life expectancy, according to your family history, according to your health, according to, as Clint Eastwood would say, do you feel lucky? If you are expecting to live more than 10 years, and a lot of people, you know, even in their 60s and 70s, they're like, yeah, I got 20 years left, easy, then remaining invested is not a dumb idea. You balance it, but all of these people, they stayed invested. They wanted to get that growth, and they didn't need, you know, they didn't need the money for themselves if the market would have crashed. And I'm sure they weathered several crashes over their lifetime, but they stayed invested primarily, or some of them exclusively, in stocks. They did their own research, aside from Robert Morin, as far as I can tell. And they did get financial advice. It's not that they didn't get financial advice, but they owned their own stocks. Famously, I think Ronald Reed, that when he passed, they had to go to a safe deposit box, and back in the day, you would get like a physical stock certificate. You know, it's different from now where you can go online and buy something digitally, but they owned their own investments. And why that is so key, you might have seen a reel I did recently about the retirement savings drain. One of the big places that our wealth gets drained off to is the fees and the costs in a typical retirement plan. And those fees and costs can drain up to, and sometimes even more than, a third of your future retirement savings are vanishing to both the fees, the costs, and also the opportunity costs, because when that fee comes around every year and skims the top, you've got every year, you know, a smaller and smaller pile. Even though it may be growing, it's a smaller pile than it would have been. And so that shrinks your money over time. John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, he used to call it the tyranny of compounding costs, because we were always told about how our investments compound, but that's not the only thing that compounds. Your costs also compound. So very good to be aware of that. And if you want to know more about investing, I am doing a double your money training, double your money, ditch the middleman training on Tuesday, the 11th. I will put a link in the comments where you can RSVP for that for free. I'm going to be telling you also about an investing boot camp that I am starting this month. So you will learn about that. You'll learn about, you know, some of the risks that we take in our finances. Certainly the fees are one, and you'll learn about a couple of the other threats to your wealth, and some things I can show you on Zoom that I can't really show you in this live stream, but would love to know any questions you have, any takeaways that you got from this. Thanks for showing up today. I hope to see you in the Double Your Money, Ditch the Middleman training. I will put that link in the comments. Remember, you are powerful, you are prosperous, and you are free, and you deserve your chance at wealth.